Good afternoon, and happy St. Patrick's Day, particularly to Edie, who's dressed for the occasion. We have an echo. All right. All right. The Secretary General is in Geneva today. The informal meeting on Cyprus that he is convening with the two Cypriot leaders and the guarantor powers of Greece, Turkey, and the United Kingdom is scheduled to begin shortly. The meeting is taking place today and tomorrow and is being held in the context of the Secretary General's Good Office's efforts on the Cyprus issue, as agreed with the two leaders on the 15th of October 2024. The informal meeting will provide an opportunity for a meaningful discussion on the way forward on the Cyprus issue. Earlier today, the Secretary General visited the construction site of the Hôtel des Nations, a new visitor center currently under construction at the UN campus in Geneva. Built through a private donation from the Fondation Hôtel des Nations, the new facility will provide visitors with an interactive experience to learn about our work, and as you can imagine, it will enable our colleagues in Geneva to better welcome visitors. The Secretary General wrapped up his visit to Bangladesh on Saturday by talking to the press and saying that as Bangladesh undergoes a significant transition under the leadership of Chief Adviser Muhammad Yunus, he recognizes the people's hopes for a future of greater democracy, justice, and prosperity. Bless you. He said that the UN stands ready to assist in fostering peace, national dialogue, trust, and healing. The Secretary General warned that with the announced cuts in financial assistance, we are facing the dramatic risk of having only 40% in 2025 of the resources available for humanitarian aid in 2024. This would have terrible consequences, starting with the drastic reduction of food rations. That would be an unmitigated disaster, he said. People would suffer and people would die. More funding is absolutely essential to guarantee the minimum support to the Rohingya population in Bangladesh. His remarks are online. We expressed concern yesterday at the launching of multiple strikes on Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen by the United States in recent days. According to the Houthis, the airstrikes resulted in 53 deaths and 101 injuries, reported from Sana'a City, Saada, and Al-Baida governorates, including reports of civilian casualties, and led to disruptions in the power supply in nearby localities. We're also concerned about the continued threats by the Houthis to resume their attacks targeting merchant and commercial vessels in the Red Sea, as well as about the reported attacks against military vessels in the area. We call for utmost restraint and a cessation of all military activities. Any additional escalation could exacerbate regional tensions, fuel cycles of retaliation that may further destabilize Yemen and the region, and pose grave risks to the already dire humanitarian situation in the country. We emphasize that international law, including international humanitarian law as applicable, must be respected by all parties at all times. We underscore that UN Security Council Resolution 2768 related to Houthi attacks against merchants and commercial vessels must be fully respected. Over the last couple of days, the UN Special Envoy, Hans Grunberg, has been in close contact with Yemeni, regional, and international stakeholders. He's called for utmost restraint and adherence to international humanitarian law, and he has pushed for a refocus on diplomacy to avoid uncontrollable destabilization in Yemen and in the region. Further contacts are held by his office on numerous levels. The envoy further called for support from the international community so that the UN-led mediation efforts can deliver results, despite the complexity of the regional dimension of the situation, including the situation in the Red Sea. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs warns that critical aid stocks are dwindling in Gaza after more than 2 weeks with no supplies coming into the Strip. The World Food Programme reports that the closure of the crossings has led to a surge in prices. This month, the cost of cooking gas soared by up to 200% compared to February, and is now only available on the black market. Our partners also report a lack of cash. Shop owners are unable to restock or pay their suppliers. This is particularly acute in North Gaza and Khan Yunis. Despite the suspension of cargo entering Gaza, the UN and our partners continue providing life-saving services for as many vulnerable people as possible. Over the past 2 weeks, our partners have screened more than 3,000 children for malnutrition across Gaza. Only a small number of cases of acute malnutrition have been identified, but partners warn that the situation could worsen if the halt on aid into Gaza continues. UNICEF says large quantities of critical supplies are stalled just a few dozen kilometers outside the Strip, including 20 ventilators for neonatal intensive care units and more than 180,000 doses of essential childhood routine vaccines, enough to fully vaccinate and protect 60,000 children under the age of 2. In a statement yesterday, UNICEF stressed that these life-saving health supplies must be allowed to enter, and warned that any further delay risks reversing the gains made for children during the ceasefire. Meanwhile, the UN Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, says that more than 270,000 children have enrolled in the agency's education program in Gaza, learning math, science, Arabic, and English. Thanks to hundreds of school counselors and assistant counselors, children are also receiving psychological first aid and benefiting from recreational activities. Turning to the situation in the West Bank, OCHA reports that the operation by Israeli forces in northern areas continues to drive displacement. Over the past few days, Israeli forces raided Tulkarm. Hundreds of families, including women, children, and older people, were displaced from Tulkarm and Nur Shams refugee camps. Partners report that most residents of the Nur Shams refugee camp have left. Meanwhile, our humanitarian partners in the northern West Bank are providing psychological assistance to children to address the impact of the operation and are training adults on how to support them. In a message to the 9th Annual Brussels Conference on Syria, the Secretary General said that after 14 years of war, Syria's economy has lost out an estimated $800 billion in GDP. He added that millions of Syrians inside and outside the country continue to need massive levels of support for food, shelter, basic services, and livelihoods. The Secretary General called on the international community to move with urgency to invest in Syria's future by expanding humanitarian support and reconsidering any cuts to funding at this critical time, and by investing in Syria's recovery, including addressing sanctions and other restrictions. The full message is online. And this morning, the Security Council held close consultations on the 1701 report. The Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Janine Hennis-Plashert, and Undersecretary General for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, briefed the Council members. Turning to Ukraine, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that today and over the weekend, attacks have caused dozens of civilian casualties, including among children. Homes, schools, and energy facilities have also sustained damage, impacting energy supplies. This is according to authorities. The strikes primarily affected the Dnipro, Donetsk, and Kharkiv regions in the east and Odessa and Kherson regions in the south. Aid workers responded swiftly and provided shelter materials, emergency repair kits, and hygiene supplies, as well as psychosocial support. According to our partners and authorities, continued attacks on Ukraine's energy sector over the past 3 years, including missile strikes, cyber attacks, and the destruction of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant, have severely impacted the generation, transmission, and distribution of power in Ukraine. In 2024 alone, there were 13 large-scale strikes, which significantly impacted Ukraine's power generation capacity. Turning to Sudan, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs warns that the ongoing siege on Zamzam camp outside the city of El Fasher is deepening the suffering of hundreds of thousands of displaced civilians who are struggling to survive after months of famine. The crisis at the camp has worsened during Ramadan, with food shortages growing even more severe. Prices of basic goods have skyrocketed, making essential items unaffordable for most families. Our partners on the ground report signs of growing hunger. Armed attacks continue across the route between Zamzam and El Fasher, with multiple casualties and injuries reported. A partner at Zamzam warns that the presence of improvised explosive devices inside the camp are also an increasing concern. Despite severe access challenges, humanitarian teams are providing food, water, and urgent medical care, but needs are far outpacing available resources. The situation has become even more critical due to funding cuts and the withdrawal of most aid organizations assisting in the area due to insecurity. And as you will recall, the World Food Programme and its partners were forced to suspend operations in Zamzam last month. OCHA is also concerned that conditions are also deteriorating in parts of Khartoum state. Local volunteer aid workers report severe malnutrition and critical shortages of medicine in the district of Sharq el-Nil. They say malnutrition is widespread among children and pregnant women, particularly in the neighborhood of East Al-Hajj Yusuf, where conditions are especially dire. Lack of food is a major problem due to the closure of most community kitchens. There's also very serious concern over reports of grave human rights violations in Khartoum as fighting rages and lines of control shift rapidly. 2 weeks ago, frontline aid workers recorded more than 800 cases of severe child malnutrition, with numbers continuing to rise. Meanwhile, cases of anemia, hepatitis, night blindness, and malaria are increasing due to the critical shortage of medicines in the few remaining functional health facilities. OCHA stresses that the scale of suffering in Sudan is staggering, and without swift intervention, the consequences will be devastating for millions. We call once again for an immediate cessation of hostilities in Sudan and unhindered humanitarian access to deliver life-saving aid. Assistant Secretary General for Peacebuilding Support in the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, Elizabeth Spehar, is leading a delegation to the Central African Republic this week from the 16th to the 21st of March. Hosted by the UN Multidimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission in the Central African Republic, MINUSCA. The delegation will include representatives from Denmark, Estonia, Germany, Italy, Ireland, Japan, Norway, the Peacebuilding Fund Advisory Group, and the Peacebuilding Commission. The visit will focus on UN-supported peacebuilding efforts in the Central African Republic. Ms. Behar and the delegation will meet with President Faustin Archange Touadera, the Prime Minister, and other senior Central African officials. The delegation will also meet with Valentin Rugwabiza, Special Representative of the Secretary General and head of MINUSCA, as well as civil society partners. Discussions will focus on inclusive peacebuilding strategies, strengthening national ownership of peace efforts, and advancing the role of youth and women in sustaining peace. The delegation's program includes field visits to peacebuilding fund-supported projects in Bangui and the Bambara region. And we have an update from the Development Coordination Office. The Secretary General has appointed Antonio Arenebar of Bolivia as the UN Resident Coordinator in Equatorial Guinea, with the host government's approval starting on the 16th of March. Mr. Arenebar brings more than 20 years' experience in sustainable development, governance, and peacebuilding to the role, with prior experience as the UN Special Advisor to the Office of the Resident Coordinator in Venezuela, head of Office of the UN Verification Mission in Medellin, Colombia, as an economist at UNDP in Bolivia, and as the Director for Latin America and the Caribbean for an initiative focused on conflict prevention, dialogue promotion, and institutional reform. That's it for me. Do we have any questions? Yes, Gabriel and then Edie.
Thank you, Farhan. On the Lebanon consultations and 1701, Israel is still in violation of the agreement, occupying, obviously, territory in Lebanon. What is the Secretary General's continued position on that?
We emphasize the importance that all parties abide fully by the cessation of hostilities agreement, and they take out all the steps that will ensure that the agreement will be in full effect, and that there will be no resumption of any hostilities between Israel and Lebanon. Our priority is to make sure that people on both sides of the blue line can return to their homes in safety and security.
In the report, it says that Israeli forces still occupy what they are calling 5 quote-unquote buffer zones within Lebanese territory. What's the Secretary General's specific response to these Israel using this terminology as buffer zones to seem as though to add legitimacy to this?
Well, on that, again, I would just reiterate, the parties did come to an agreement, which we fully support, that led to the cessation of hostilities. That was a very significant achievement, and we want to make sure that both parties abide by all of its terms. Edie.
A quick follow-up on that. Could we get a little better readout on what Ms. Hennes-Pleshart and Mr. Lacroix told the council? I realize that consultations are closed, but I mean a sentence or two or three.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you're right that it is a close consultation, so there's not a lot of detail we can go into. Ms. Hennes-Pleshart presented the report, the latest report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 1701. That report should be available hopefully online as a document. If not, you can come and we can share with you that. But the gist of that report is what they talked about.
And on the M23 and Congo, there's been quite a bit of action today in Europe on the M23's actions backed by Rwanda. And I wonder if we can get any kind of an update on where the M23 forces are. I know they took Uvira in South Kivu, but how far south have they gotten? Where are they now?
Okay, yeah, I'll try to get an update from our colleagues in MONUSCO about what the current presence of M23 are. We have, of course, provided periodic updates of the areas that they've seized, but we'll try to give an overview. Yes, Deji.
Yes, there's small skirmishes between Lebanon and Syria during the in their border area. Does the Secretary General have anything to say on the latest development?
Basically, I mean, you're aware of what we've said. We want to make sure that there's no fighting by any outside forces in Syria. It's important that the Syrian people are able to rebuild their society, and we want to make sure that that all conflict from any outside forces is stopped.
Syrian caretaker government accused Hezbollah started this skirmish. Does the UN have anybody in Damascus or in Lebanon had any more information on this?
We have people, as you know, Najat Roshdi, the deputy special envoy dealing with Syria, is in Damascus, but we are not dealing firsthand with the presence of foreign fighters. That's an issue for the national authorities. Sinan.
Thank you, Farhan. I have a question on Syria. The Kurds, Druze, Christians, and more minorities have rejected the constitutional declaration issued by transitional government over the weekend. And the question is, I wonder what Secretary General thinks about those rejections, what his reactions to these rejections, and also does he have any critics about this new transitional constitution? Thank you.
This is a process that's going forward, and we want to make sure that as the Constitution is developed, it is developed in an inclusive manner, taking into account the concerns of all of the communities of Syria. Ultimately, we want to see a Syrian society established that is one in which all the communities of Syria feel properly included.
Quick follow-up. Basically, the minorities are saying that they don't have enough protection in this new constitution. Does Secretary General have any message to those minorities when it comes to the protection of minorities?
Well, the protection of minorities is an important facet of any functional society, and we have tried to underscore in our own talks with the transition authorities in Syria the need for inclusiveness. Abdulhamid.
Han, I have two questions. First, since the ceasefire started on January 17, an average of 3 Palestinians a day killed in Gaza. And when you speak about ceasefire, you keep calling on both parties. Did you trace any violation from the Palestinian side to the ceasefire, except it's from Israel? So why you don't say it clearly and bluntly who is violating the ceasefire law? The ceasefire agreement.
I've made clear some of the restrictions and some of the actions taken by the different sides in my regular reporting, and we do this regularly. Of course, we call on all sides to abide by agreements. We do that as a general practice with all of the agreements in all of the areas that we deal with. What's your next question?
My second question, in his speech today to the Security Council, Pakistani Ambassador Munir Akram said that we have evidence that our main adversary, which in reference to India, of course, that they have been involved in the terrorist attack against his country. Does the UN share that assessment?
What we believe is that it's important for all of the countries, including India and Pakistan, to work together to deal with any of the concerns that they face regarding international terrorism. Yes, please.
Thank you, Farhan. Regarding the Secretary General's visit to Bangladesh and his meeting with Chief Adviser Muhammad Yunus, did the Secretary General raise the issue of human rights abuses committed against minorities in Bangladesh, including the Hindu community? There is a report also of the UN Human Rights Council that said that perpetrators of such attacks have had impunity. So was that issue discussed and raised?
In his talks overall with officials, he made sure to address any concerns we have regarding human rights. Yes. Yes.
Let me ask something you have more knowledge on. Last week, the Secretary General announced UN 80 initiative. Do you have any measures categorized as quick wins now already started implement underway?
We announced this just a few days ago,
Yeah,
and although
that's quick wins.
and
That's-
although we
that's the
have this
definition
phrase
of
called
quick
quick
wins.
wins,
Yeah.
quick is not the same thing as immediate.
Okay.
So you'll hear more about this in coming days.
Right. But do you have a schedule now? When will the 42nd entrance be closed?
I believe
The exact date.
that is to happen once the Commission on the Status of Women meetings end.
That's
so.
next week?
So I believe it could be next week.
Okay, one last thing. Last week, we also received an email. It's about Earth Hour. It says UNHQ will dim non-essential lights from 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. on this Saturday. My question is, since it's non-essential lights, then why you turn it on after Earth Hour? I mean,
You're absolutely right. I think that that's a poor use of expression. All non-essential lights will be shut because they're not essential.
yeah, but then why it's on for the rest of other time? I mean, yeah, exactly. I can see UN building like in middle of the night in my home with all those lights on.
All I know is that the lights in our offices, once the offices aren't used for any period of time, turn themselves off, and that's how it should be throughout the building. Mike Wagenheim.
Thank you, Farhan. Following up on the Secretary General's efforts to streamline operations and use the money better, has there been any thought given, based on the amount of money that goes to $4 million to the Commission of Inquiry? There was $300,000 approved in December to prepare documentation for the ICJ non-advisory opinion on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Has there been any thought given to putting a cap on the amount of money that goes to things that result in apparently nothing, like the Commission of Inquiry and Francesca Albanese's work? Has there been any thought given to putting a cap on the money that goes toward those initiatives and putting more toward humanitarian efforts and things of that nature that actually turn out results?
Without getting into your specific examples, the Secretary General, in the remarks that he made to you last week, made clear that there were certain things in terms of dealing with the huge number of mandates we had to try to see what could be done to shrink them. Obviously, that won't necessarily involve the projects you're talking about. It will involve trying to find out what mandates can be better consolidated so that we can do as many of the key functions that are asked of us without having as much duplication of effort and as much effort that goes into tasks that are not necessarily needed any longer. Yes.
Is there just
yes.
one follow-up on that? Is there a particular? I know you said the mandates themselves. Is there a particular reason that millions of dollars should continue flowing into other initiatives that produce no tangible results or good for the world?
You may find them not tangible results, but the fact is that there's many things for which the results, although slow in coming, can in fact be valuable and valuable down the line. There's many different bodies that the UN has had that has proved valuable information, again, down the line in terms of things like accountability. Yes.
Farhan, just to follow up on my question and what you responded, can you share more details as to what the Secretary General and the Chief Advisor discussed, and what was shared from the Bangladesh side also on actions taken?
Well, no, we gave out readouts of the Secretary General's meetings. I don't really have anything further. So beyond that and the press remarks that he made on Saturday. So I would refer you to those. Yes, please.
To follow up on Deji and Mike's questions around cost cutting, we've heard some rumours about UNHQ staff being asked or consulted about taking pay cuts of as much as 20%. Wondered if you could comment on that, please.
As far as I'm aware, this is not something that has been taken up by management, but as you know, because we did provide a background briefing, any steps to be taken would also include consultations with the staff union. And with that, I wish you all a good afternoon.